I want to do a video about Leeds because what we're going to go through today from The Economist lays out something we should be really talking about. And that is, of course, the importance of infrastructure. Now, you take a look at Manchester, and Manchester is absolutely thriving. Why? Infrastructure. It was very, very well connected through rail lines, basically through sheer luck. Like, if the rail connections didn't already previously exist, Manchester would be very much in the same situation that Leeds is. It also has Manchester Airport, one of the biggest, aviation hubs in the north. That is a massive piece of infrastructure. It's got trams, it's got buses, it's got everything of infrastructure you can possibly think of. Infrastructure is important. And yet, Leeds, UK's third largest city, the second, I believe, biggest financial hub outside of London in the UK. Many people don't realize that, and yet this side of the Pennines, of course, if you want to look at cities where you should be investing, where you should be putting infrastructure, and things like that, you look on this side of, the Pennines. Well, what have you got? You've got Newcastle up at the top. You come down. Where's your next sort of big city? It's Leeds. Sorry, York, but nice tourist destination. But York has fundamentally changed a lot since then. It is not the situation it was once in. It is Leeds, and then you get to Sheffield. Pretty much in many ways, it's sister city. Sheffield, massive digital offering, massively digital city. So much going off in and around the digital area in Sheffield. Again, something people do not realize, but also suffering a massive lack of infrastructure. Massive lack of infrastructure. It desperately needs. So I want to go over this because this just goes to show you how much and how desperate places like Leeds, where if you invested into it, you would absolutely reap dividends on this. Because infrastructure, as I constantly bang on about, is important. You need to build it because it is pointless doing anything else, as we'll see in a moment, if people cannot get to it. Doesn't matter if you build it, if people can't get to it, why are they going to go there? And this creates, I think, a fascinating conundrum, which we'll see in a moment. Leeds, too prosperous to pity, but too poor to thrive. I can't disagree. Because if you ask anyone, should investment be put into Leeds? Everyone around here, at least in Yorkshire, would say, "Oh no, Leeds is far too much. It's far too prosperous to invest in. You don't need to invest somewhere else." So yeah, it is an interesting conundrum, but I think it's something that does need to be talked about. I think on this, and it just goes to show you what we'll see in a moment. Infrastructure important. So before we get on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. There are links to my Patreon page, the one after this link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. Must Leeds always lose? There's a lot of people who would I think jokingly very much say yes, especially when it comes to football, but I'm talking here about the city on this one. So attendees heading to the Leeds dock for the Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum in May are in for a real treat. Infrastructure lovers arriving in the North City, arriving by train, should go down into the bowels of the station, ignoring the whiff of the damp from its position on the arches above the River Ear, cut through the quayside for the new buildings, past towards a crumbling stone jetty, where a tram was supposed to link the dock to the station. But It was never built. And if you are from Leeds, that is almost the story of pretty much every infrastructure project. We're going to build this really good infrastructure thing, and then it never gets built. Leeds remains the biggest city in Europe without a mass transit system. Instead, the very twee, a very bright yellow second-hand taxi boat from Amsterdam now has to do. What Leeds wants, Leeds does not get. Whenever a major infrastructure decision has been made, England's third biggest city has inevitably been now on the wrong end of it. The Leeds limb of HS2, the blighted high-speed rail network, was the first to be cut. Northern Powerhouse Rail, a plan to improve links between Leeds and Manchester, was then curtailed. After even the city improved the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport back in 2021, the then Conservative government blocked it. So 3 big infrastructure projects, which would have absolutely been a massive benefit to Leeds, gone. No HS2, so no faster north-south travel on that. So that's gone. No east-west travel because Northern House Powerhouse Rail gone. Again, that would have been very, very much a big improvement on transport infrastructure for Leeds. And now, expansion to Leeds Bradford Airport, no, cancelled. Leeds needs it desperately in a lot of these things, and it never gets it. It is crying out for all this type of stuff. Never gets built, but it would be a massive boost to the city for this if it gets some of this stuff done. Anyway, back to this. The tree is, of course, now a very bright yellow reminder of the city's tramlessness. It runs every 15 minutes at £3 for each way. Even if there was at least a moment now to enjoy the shift of fortunes, is it at least now? Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister and even attended university there. Even better, a member of the Leeds West and Pudley was, of course, Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Yet Labour has announced a slew of measures to improve Britain's now growing, thriving southeast. Heathrow is to benefit from a new runway, while a rail route connecting Oxford and Cambridge is to be dotted now with new towns. Leeds has lost out again. Why? It is not the NIMBYism at the moment. Leeds is the city of architectural renderings plastered now on the side of building sites. Its population grew by 8.1% between 2011 and 2021. That is the highest rate of any big city bar Bristol. It built over 4,000 houses between 2023 and 2024. Even if every local authority matched it on a per person basis, Labour would need to meet its very stretched target to build 1.5 million homes by 2029, and most do not. Instead, Leeds has now become a laboratory for a dominant strand of thinking in Britain's treasury, that infrastructure does not matter much. In this world, now a relative failure of England's main cities is now the lack of skills rather than a lack of capital investment. Leeds is now an unwilling lab rat. Standing near at least the ring road where gleaming high-speed rail terminus should be is an Asda centre for merchandising excellence. There is no finer place to learn the best way to sell a sausage, but there is no worse place to actually try to catch a train. Couldn't agree with them more on that. Leeds is such an oxymoron because there's so many. You go or you know anyone who does business in Leeds. There's all these fascinating things going on in Leeds, and yet you couldn't think of a worse place really to have it because it needs so much infrastructure spending built on it. As I said at the beginning, doesn't matter if you build it in Leeds, no one will come because the infrastructure is terrible. So the result now is economic purgatory. While the city is unable to either truly thrive or wither, take Temple Works, for example, a bizarre warehouse that combines its Egyptian-style hieroglyphs with experimental Victorian engineering. It is now at the heart of a redevelopment to the south of the main station in Leeds. It was to be the site of the British Library's Northern Branch, at least at the last budget. Reeves now chopped its funding from 10 million. The building is still Grade 1 listed, meaning it must be cherished, and the British state enforces the obligations of a rich country, meanings now of an increasing poor one. An area that is to grow, it will have absolutely nothing now, it's rotting hulk. While investment is, of course, greeted with technocratic skepticism, only policies can now loosen the purse strings. It's a game that Leeds has played very badly. Greater Manchester has long managed to pull all this together, while its coherent whole, politically and economically, by contrast, West Yorkshire and its newish combined area, which Leeds is now the most important part, is now an awkward compromise. We thought people in Yorkshire hated everyone else, said David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, during one row in the region. We didn't realize that they hated each other so much. It is still the nearest summary of now the intra-Yorkshire politics. And oh my word. Yeah, Jesus Christ. North Yorkshire hates everyone. East Yorkshire hates everyone. South Yorkshire hates everyone. Everyone hates everyone. No one can get together to agree something. There was at one point, which I still think is the best idea. We should have gone for the one Yorkshire policy. Rather than having 4 different area mayors, we should have had one Yorkshire mayor. That would have been amazing, because you then would have combined a massive region with massive economic potential with amazing potential for political motion if you'd have that one Yorkshire mayor going in that one regional direction. But it never happened because no one could agree on what exactly they wanted to do or bring it about. It is the biggest tragedy that that never happened. Instead, now we've got 4 different regional mayors. Again, it's good that we've got them, but what we could have had would have been so much better. But because they just don't trust each other, because of the weird politics that goes on in Yorkshire, mostly between the councils being forced to compete against each other. And that is the unfortunate reality of Yorkshire politics, unfortunately. So a paranoid now style shapes, of course, the city's politics. The current government insists it is, of course, committed now to a tram in Leeds, just as the government was committed to a tram under the Conservatives back in 1993 and Labour under the 2000. There will, of course, be shovels in the ground by 2028, insist local politicians. Those in the city will believe it when they see it. Local investors are unwilling to even place money on it either, yet more economic stasis is now the result. And yet we've joked about this many times before. The tram in Leeds is the greatest who knows what possibility, but until it actually gets some serious investment, and like I say, this has been such considered a joke. People who would invest in this aren't willing to put money into it because they don't take it seriously either. And the result is just stalemate, complete economic stalemate. You could have an amazing growing city that would be vibrant, an economic new jewel of the north to complement Manchester, and yet it doesn't happen. So some have now fallen into paranoia, into even conspiracy, and even the idea that politicians and civil servants in the southeast actively now want the region to fail. The reality now is just more depressing. The government now is institutionally incapable of caring about a middling city doing fine, but not well. Leeds was never a post-industrial wasteland. It did not require the fiscal CPR applied to even Liverpool or even Teesside. An official from the treasury visiting on the day will see cranes in the sky and the city's various mix of Greggs, a baker, and stores selling Gucci, and assume that just all is peachy. So again, very true. If you walk through Leeds city centre, you will see this insane mix of shops, if literally, and he's right. I know the street he's talking about. You walk through the shopping center, and he's literally a Greg's and a Gucci right next to each other. It's so bizarre, but it's the paradox of Leeds in many ways. Yet the government now looks past places like Leeds when it comes to growth. Reeves and the Treasury will now focus on the South because it pays Britain's bills. Only two regions are net contributors to Britain's coffers: London and the South East. Leeds is now caught in a trap. It is too prosperous to pity, but too poor to pay its own way. If Britain had a growth problem, it is not that it has hobbled its high potential stars, such as Oxford and Cambridge in the south, but it is because of cities like Leeds that they underperform. And if Leeds has a problem, it is because a place like Leeds Docks is almost empty. Local businesses rule out moving there because it is poorly connected. No amount of signs declaring it Leeds Creative District in its now tasteful sans serif font changes that. On a fine recent winter's afternoon, the place is dead. The only noise comes from the buildings ripping down, the flammable cladding from the surrounding buildings, and the twee blastings of the horn as it now rounds the bends on the year. I couldn't agree more, to be honest. Leeds is in desperate need of some serious funding. And yet, I would say this: if you want to achieve growth, then you need to look at cities like Leeds and invest in them. Because we cannot continue relying on the South just to be a moneymaker for the rest of the country. You have to get, and this is always been the part of the problem, you have to get all that investment that goes into the southeast and start putting it up in the north. The problem then becomes that those people in the southeast turn around and go, why are they getting that money? And then guess what? The Conservatives come along and go, that's absolutely right. They don't deserve that money. And then, they end up inevitably sort of winning. And then, of course, that money gets put down back into the southeast. One of the big reasons why the Northern Powerhouse never happened either. If the Conservatives had actually gone ahead and done that, if Cameron Osborne had seriously gone ahead and done that, would have been a huge swathe of investment across the north. But again, they wouldn't do it because all their, southeast supporters turned around and went, hold on, why are they getting that money? The problem we have here is the southeast has to now pay for the development of the rest of the country. They have to realize that. People down there have to realize that investment has to come from there. Money has to start going to the rest of the country, because guess what? If you do that, that will make the rest of the country better. But that will mean they don't get anything, or at least any investments, for maybe 20, 30 years. And they'll turn around and they'll balk at that idea. But in the meantime, during those 20, 30 years, you are improving so much more of the rest of the country, which, guess what, would generate growth, would make the rest of the country more economically equal, more economically prosperous. But it is unfortunate that we are in this situation, because that saying is true, that Leeds is just too prosperous to pity and it is too poor to thrive. It cannot pay its own way. It cannot build those own trams. Even though we've had this new announcement that these trams are going to get built, I am skeptical. I am very skeptical that they'll get built. I'd love them to get built because I think it would be something that Leeds very, very, very much needs. But unfortunately, the only thing they have is a little yellow water taxi. And that has been, and I want to stress this, that has been the only infrastructure development over the past, what, 10, 15 years? Leeds desperately needs so much infrastructure development. But for some reason, every single time when things like this get looked at, Leeds is fine. It's an absolute shame. The thinking of how we invest needs to really fundamentally change, and it really needs to get done. Otherwise, you've just got situations like Leeds, a city that could be could become the new Manchester of the North. And not only that, but places like Sheffield would benefit as well. And that's the other thing you need to sort of realize, because this is the other thing that gets into it. If Leeds gets development or anything like that, Sheffield turns around and goes, "Why aren't we getting the same?" And like, what's going on here? We want, and fair enough. Yes, Sheffield should absolutely get some of that development as well. But the thing is, it's arguments like that stop the money going into Leeds, into this weird, Yorkshire politics that we all, hate each other. Which again, if you're from Yorkshire, we joke about it, on on Politics Social a couple of times. Me and Darren certainly do. But yeah, it stops investment every single time, every single time. Um, and it just causes, so much potential. So much potential in this region is lost because we either don't get that infrastructure spending or we end up arguing. Because I guarantee you now, even though we have these new four mayors, eventually they're going to start arguing amongst each other. I can guarantee you, I can guarantee you that is going to happen sooner or later amongst these new mayors that we're having. Um, so yeah, let me know what you think down below. I'd be very interested to hear, like I say, especially you are from Leeds, what you think this article, because I think that gets everything right about what Leeds really needs, what needs to be done, and sort of the thinking that needs to really fundamental change. About where we need to really invest. And it is places like Leeds that, on the surface, if you looked at them, you'd think, oh, that area's fine. It doesn't need the investment. But you only have to like scratch the surface to see it is in dire need of this stuff. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.